Welcome to Neurodivergency, where neurodivergent voices turn struggle into strength. We're here to break the stigma, dive into truth, and bring you real tools for clarity, healing, and hope. Today's guest is Mark Manderson. Hi, Mark. Thank you for joining us.
How's it going, Anthony? Thank you for having me on here. I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Yes, same here. Same here. So, Mark, tell us a bit about you and what you do. What brings you on here?
So for the we just hit 25 years. I run a mental health and addiction treatment center in Orange County in California, over here in the States. And we just we started to want to help people heal, and we noticed that a lot of people were treating the symptoms back in late 90s, early 2000s. And very few are actually addressing the core driving or the primary issue. And so we started to just wanted to serve. And from there, we kind of, I wouldn't say reverse engineered, but kind of failed our way into asking a lot of questions and finding new ways to actually address some, lifelong issues with individuals that has been passed down from generation to generation, because we all have ups and downs. And how do you live this life when life is great? Because everyone seems to want that, but also how do you live when it's horrific? And so a lot of times human nature is we want to numb and sedate, and that creates a pattern that becomes habitual, and eventually this day and age starts to spin out of control and really wreck a lot of families and stories and different things. So that's something that we started back in 2000, and just wanting to learn how to really get lifelong results and what that looks like. And so what led me to that journey is I was 8 years old. My mom, single mom, raising my sister and me. And our aunt, so my mom's sister, was struggling with drugs and was kind of in and out of treatment. Back then, there were very few treatment centers. And so she got kicked out of a rehab. And so she came and lived with us. And I had bunk beds in my room. So I was the lucky one that got super cool, outspoken, fun kid at heart. My Aunt Steffi, she was basically my bunk mate. But I remember one day coming home, and she was asleep on the floor and just kind of lifeless. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than intuitively, like little kids know when something's wrong. I just remember walking in, and there were pills everywhere. So I literally, as I'm stepping over and the pills are crunching underneath my feet, I go and I try to rock her to wake her up, and she's not waking up. So I run and I grab my mom. My mom comes in, fortunately revives her. But because she brought drugs into the house, my sister and I were in jeopardy. And so my mom set it up for her to leave and go live somewhere else. But a couple months later, same thing happened. But there's nobody there to save her or help her. And so I lost my aunt. And at a young age, it's one of my earliest core memories, but all I remember is stuffing it down and then just going on and living life. And so
How
it was
old were
probably
you?
right.
8 years old?
Yeah, 8 years
Was
old.
that? Eight.
So
Wow.
I got really good at stuffing. Everything was great. We're fine. No big deal. It's okay. And probably right around college, end of college, it was like everything just started to come and surface, and this depression just hit, and I couldn't figure it out. I got a great job. I just graduated college. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but I was dying on the inside and became suicidal. And just, it was the most painful time of my life. And so that is where I thought there's got to be a way. And I started looking to, you go to a doctor, they want to medicate. And so I started looking at other ways outside of medication. And I thought there's got to be something I'm not seeing. And so I learned a lot of holistic approaches. So one of the things we do here is we kind of blend Eastern holistic and Western of more clinical basis. And we found a great blend of putting the two together to really help with the brain chemistry, but expose the core issue that has been driving that unwanted and undesirable behavior. And one of the things that we started to learn was that it's like we're always trying to feel better instead of getting better at feeling, and
Yeah,
understanding that
that's
there's
that's a
spectrums of
huge
feelings.
topic.
Yeah. And so that's kind of
Absolutely.
what led me down this path. And then once I started learning about
Yeah.
podcasts and being able to go and utilize this message to other people's audiences, I started to find that most people in life go, I'm hurting too. And I feel like I'm broken. And there's a message of hope that you're not broken. It's just once we learn to begin to change the narrative and identify that core issue, the core lie, we can start healing and start actually enjoying life, the ups. And this is going to sound crazy, but enjoying the downs, even the horrific parts of life, learning to actually be present for it. And so that's
Yeah.
why I'm here.
Incredible. So tell us a bit more about your story. You mentioned a little bit the depression, suicidal thoughts. I get the impression that that was your lowest rock bottom point. Walk me through, you know, that that time then, and what does life look like now? And then how did you get to that point? I mean, what tools and all? And we can go through it in a little bit of steps, but
Yeah, sure. So the lowest low was I recognized it wasn't that I wanted to die, it's I didn't want to live in this pain. And what's interesting is of course I've got the knowledge now looking back, but when I look back, there was still I was so terrified. And this part that makes zero sense. I was so terrified of using drugs because of what it did to our family that I wasn't willing to numb or sedate. So I remember walking out of my house one day. There's a main street that is like a mile from where I was living at the time. And I thought, I'm going to walk out. And I left that day with the intent to take my life. And I remember I started running through different scenarios of what can I do, but I didn't want it to look like I was taking my own life. I wanted it to look like an accident because of my family and my friends. And I wanted, even the pain, I wanted to keep the mask up of everything was great. And that was really the lowest moment is because as I tried to think of different things, there was a part of me that wanted to live and it just kept poking holes and everything. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then that part of me just kind of like, well, yeah, but like if you step out in front of oncoming traffic, you'll end up a quadriplegic and then life is going to really suck. You'll be stuck in a wheelchair and you didn't succeed in taking your own life. And I thought, well, gosh, well, I don't want to do that. And so as I'm running through every scenario, this little part, whether you want to call it a guardian angel or the conscious, but it just kept coming up and saying, well, this will happen and you'll still be alive. And so I remember feeling like a total failure. I'm like, I can't even die. That's how much of a failure I am. And
mm,
so I wish I had a story where like I had some magical awakening and then poof, in a second, everything was great, but it wasn't. I didn't know how to reach out for help. The guilt and the shame was so big because my family was very involved in the church. And so I just kept this hidden. And then just by looking on the internet, I mean, this is way back in the day. So Google was out. I'm starting to Google different things. I'm looking for different methods. And I just started finding kind of like these little rabbit holes. And I would just look and start to get educated and thought, okay, that kind of makes sense. And this makes sense. I never heard of that. And as I started to finally talk about it, just with different people, I found that people weren't judgmental. I thought they were going to look at me like I was broken, like the Scarlet Letter, and most people were really empathetic and looked at me, and it wasn't like, "How could you feel this way?" Because on the outside you have everything. It was just, "Man, that sounds tough. Tell me more about it." And as I started to take this shameful secret and expose it, it got lighter and lighter and lighter. And then eventually, I met a mentor who ended up really helping shape my life for a while. He had a wonderful way of coming beside you and hugging you while kind of punching you in the gut, but in a loving way. And here's what I mean by that. I struggled with failure for such a long time. And I still remember one of the earliest conversations when I was telling him that, I was super suicidal and I still came and went. He just started laughing. Now we had trust built, so it wasn't a thing of like, screw you, but there was a part of me kind of like, who are you to judge me? What are you laughing at? And he said, I think it's funny that you are so afraid of failure and you have labeled failure as a negative thing in your life, yet because you're a failure in one very easy area to not fail at, he's like, it saved your life. So I think failure is a beautiful thing for you in your life. I just think you need to start looking at it differently. And no one ever confronted me like that before. I thought I never looked at failure as a positive.
mm.
Thank goodness I actually failed that day because I wouldn't be here. I mean, now, 20 years later, I'm married, two kids. I'm getting to help thousands and thousands of people. And I love my life. It is so full and beautiful. But the version of me back then had no idea this was possible. If you would have told me, I would have said, yeah, you're so full like everybody else.
Wow. Incredible. Glad that you were able to find people that you were connected to who were able to help. How much of that help was through the medical system versus friends, family, or other people like mentors?
Yeah, so it was actually zero medical. And the reason why is because bipolar runs deep in my family. I mean, actually, I think if I remember correctly, my dad was one of the first people diagnosed in the United States. And I don't know if he was a part of something, but he's like, I was one of the first Ritalin kids. So he's in a medical book somewhere. He was telling me, but that's how far back it goes once we started
Wow.
diagnosing. And so I've got a lot of family members diagnosed bipolar. And so I did not want to get on medication. Now, I'm not anti-medication. We do
Mm,
medication here at our center. But one of the things that I saw in my narrative was I see with my family what it's like when they're on medication. And yes, it stabilizes them, but there's a part that appears numb and just kind
yeah,
of out of tune. And I guess it was intuitive, but as I just started finding different people and asking questions, it didn't really pop on my radar of looking and getting diagnosed for medication, but of looking at stating what is creating this emotional pain. What is at the core of this? There's got to be something because there were times in my life where I was very happy and I was thinking about happy things and talking about happy things and I was happy. And then I thought, okay, when did I get really dark? And I thought, okay, I'm focusing on really depressing things. My thought process is really depressing, and I feel really depressed. Could there be a path here where these things align with what we do, what we think, what we feel, what we eat, all sorts of things? And then that's where, as I started talking about it, found this mentor, and his biggest thing was just I don't think he called it this. I call it this now, but it's called laboratory living. Like, what if you set up your own scientific experiments on yourself and ran them 90 days at a time? So, what if you started working out? Now, the science behind working out is what I think 5 times more potent than taking medication, and this is all scientifically backed. But
mm,
it's like, oh, okay, well, let's try exercising. And I started
yeah.
noticing when I exercise, I feel good, and when I feel good, I make better decisions. When I make better decisions, life gets even better. And then it was, well, what are you eating? I'm a college kid, man. Top ramen, Taco Bell, like all this processed fast food. Interesting. High sugar, high inflammation. What if we started to change what you eat and just for a laboratory 90-day sprint and see what happens? And what happened was as I started eating differently, as I started moving differently, I started feeling differently. And that was the part where I thought, oh my gosh, I had been creating this myself. I had no idea. I thought it was all the things that did happen to me when I was a kid and all the things that didn't happen to me and I wanted to happen to me as a kid. And I kept that narrative for a very long time. And then once I started questioning the narrative, that's when life really started to change.
Wow. So yeah, a lot of pieces to your journey, but a lot of self-taught, self-investigation, really motivated to step out of that pain and get yourself in a better situation. And through these little experiments on yourself, you were able to start that self-fulfilling cycle, leading to more and more positive results. And compound that over 20 years, and I guess you get to a much better place.
Yeah, well, it was that internal narrative. Like I used to think my thoughts were fact. I used to think like, okay, these are my thoughts and feelings. It's factual. This is reality. And I had no idea that my thoughts lie to me. So one of the things is like you can't reconcile a lie, you can only expose it. So once I started having some of these thoughts and I shared and I said, I don't know if this is to be true. It feels true, but what if it's not? And as I noticed, I would take these thoughts and I would remove them from myself. So they're no longer me identity. Because anytime we challenge our identity, it's really tough because we think it's us. So as I started taking some of these primary driving questions, I kept asking myself on loop. I pulled it out, kind of put it on the table and said, well, let's discuss this. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not emotionally attached. I'm like, oh, I can challenge this and I don't feel less than. And that was where I shared with you, one of my mentors kind of laughed at my truth of I'm a failure, I'm a bad person. And then once we take it off and say, okay, what have I failed at? I'm so glad I failed at some of these things because I wouldn't be alive if I wasn't a failure in certain areas. Thank you for failure. This is beautiful. Where else can I leverage failure in my life? Because now I see this feedback as opposed to basically that death curse.
Incredible. Imagine that me sitting in front of you right now was the version of you that was depressed and suicidal. And I'm asking you for help. What would you say to me?
So one of the things that I had to learn, because like I said before, I became really good at stuffing. And I thought we have positive emotions that we want to chase all the time, and we have negative emotions that we want to numb, sedate, stuff, whatever it is. I didn't know that emotion is meant to be felt. And so if someone is struggling with depression, and this is usually counterintuitive, the part that allowed me to heal was once I started to ask my depressed part of me, what is it that you're wanting me to know? What are you needing from me? And for me and most people I've taken through this process, it's that part just wants to know it's safe and it's seen and that it's accepted. And so that's where, I mean, there's different modalities. There's shadow work and all different things. But when we actually learn to accept and love that part of us, it's like, I don't know how to describe it other than years and years ago, we went through the toddler phase with our kids. And if you ignore the toddler, they get louder and louder and more physical and really start pulling like, dad, dad, dad. I'm kind of like, what? And you find out, I just yelled at my kid, a toddler, for just wanting my attention. Like, what's going on? And so learning from that, when it's like, dad, yeah, buddy, what's going on? I want you to watch this. Okay, let's make some time and let's watch, and totally present. He and both my daughter and him were so fulfilled in that moment. I thought, what if my emotions aren't that different? What if when they're screaming and yelling instead of stuff, and I just said, I want to watch you. What are you needing? I just need to be loved, to know that I'm okay, even as a failure. Yeah, I love you. Actually, one of the main reasons why I love you is because you have failed in some wonderful areas and you've learned and grown. So for me, it was giving my depression a seat at the table and letting it know you're welcome anytime. I am so sorry that I kept you at bay, kept you outside, and forced you to watch, love and joy and fulfillment and everything else, laugh and have fun at the table. And so as I started doing that, anger showed up, kind of like, hey man, I miss you. Can I come hang? It's like, yeah, now able to feel all these beautiful emotions and not attach the meaning of good or bad, but what is it you're wanting me to know? What is the gift you're giving me? And it just helps expand your world in so many different ways. Eventually, you end up building a life you don't ever want to sedate or retire from. I mean, it's kind of cool.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And I really hope that conversations like these can inspire people who are sitting in those dark places to, rather than push away those negative things, to be more curious, to ask those questions, to let it be heard and seen and welcome it and see what happens from that point.
Yeah, when someone's in the pit of pain, they're just wanting someone to sit with them. And so to be able to say, I know this pit very well. I've been in this pit many times. Let me just come and sit down and listen. You're not going to try to fix me? No. I'm here to listen, to let you know I've been in this pit before. And then all of a sudden, sometimes just that is enough where a person goes, oh my gosh, because every time I say it, everyone goes right into let's fix it mode. This is wrong. You shouldn't be feeling this, as opposed to I'm here with you.
Yeah, incredible. You mentioned a lot about emotional awareness and going from stuffing and numbing to actually feeling and noticing. Could you tell us more about the journey that led you to this much better place now? What were all the tools, methods, modalities that you had to research, experiment with, come across that you want to share with people who might be struggling?
Yeah, a lot of it came down to beginning to ask better questions. I noticed a lot of the questions I asked had some weight and meaning and assumptions. So when I ask, like, why am I such a screw up? The brain goes, oh, you just gave me a command. Let me show you every memory we have of you screwing up. And then all of a sudden, that's what's playing like on the big screen in front of me. And so I start feeling like a total screw up. And I wasn't even aware of the questions I was asking. I just felt like, oh my gosh, I keep reliving all this pain. By understanding it's our past hurts that create the constant cycle of future fear, we're able to go back to reconcile the past so we don't continue to project it to the future. Does that make sense?
It it's starting to make sense having been through that journey, but how does one who is in that difficult place start to make sense of it?
So the first way is when we're silent about it, we suffer in silence. And so this
Mm,
is one of the things that leads to addiction is addiction's isolation. We cut
yeah,
ourselves off from people, places, and things, and the alcohol or the drug becomes the only thing that we start to look at. And so the opposite of that is we can look at, well, then that means recovery is connection. And
and
so,
vulnerability.
yeah, so if I'm being open, I'm being real, I'm being raw, I'm being authentic and sharing, free of receiving or giving any judgment, I'm able to start to explore these things. And what we find time and time again is when we get a group of clients together, one person starts to share, the other person starts looking around, kind of like, you too? I thought I was the only one. That's what happens in silence. And so when we suffer by what we withhold, it's not necessarily from what's been withheld. So we start looking at the narrative, like I was sharing with myself, of all the things that did happen to me as a kid that shouldn't. I'm now arguing with reality. And I've learned when I argue with reality, I'm the one that gets hurt. Reality doesn't be like, oh, let me go back and fix that. Or you're right, I'm sorry. Reality goes, no, this is what happened. And so now if I'm continually in conflict with reality, I continue to bring that pain and magnify it, sometimes days, weeks, months, in my case, years and even decades later. I'm like, okay, this sucks. What if I learn to no longer argue with reality, but learn how to live with it and change the narrative? And so this is where we start releasing that war within and we start finding peace, because it's impossible to have peace with yourself if you're constantly at war.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What is your relationship with addictions? How does addiction play a part in the mental health journey or overlap in any way?
Oh, yeah. Well, if you look at mental health, there's so much brain chemistry and different things that are skew this day and age with all the stimulus and all the dopamine hits, and literally how we are, well, there's science behind it. We're actually rewiring our brain. And so if I am used to constant dopamine hits, instant gratification, I don't have to be present to feel. So anytime I get some feelings that I either don't want to or know how to experience, I can numb and sedate. Now there is a continuum, something as small as just going on and scrolling social media and numbing out that way, some for food and different things. And as you go, and then there's the really more destructive that actually really harms the individual, such as drugs and alcohol. And so of understanding that a lot of this is based on the mental health part of figuring out how to regulate brain chemistry, how to develop habits and patterns and behaviors that actually stoke the healthier parts of the brain, that practice delayed gratification, these different aspects. That is the part that we start seeing where we kind of blend the two together. It's rare that a person is stuck in this addiction cycle that doesn't have some form of mental health, whether it's actually like diagnosed bipolar or something like that, or even depression, anxiety. There's so many different parts on the spectrum. So by diagnosing, let me put it this way, helping the individual diagnose what the core lies are, what the stories they're telling themselves that's creating the thought process, that's creating the engaging in the behavior, because it's a progressive disease and it gets harder and harder and worse and worse. So as we're able to do that, now all of a sudden we can start putting in some new daily habits and routines, and I call them rituals. And all of a sudden we start asking different questions, we start feeling differently. And then now a person starts building the life that they're like, man, you couldn't pay me to go use. Like, I love this. And I know that takes me away from this. I'm going to continue building this.
Yeah, amazing. There's such a huge overlap indeed with mental health and addiction, as well as trauma. And this
Hmm.
is just a lot of education that people uh, should look into and just understand a little bit more about how it all works to understand what is it going on in my situation. And now imagine that I'm someone that is listening and I'm going, okay, I get that I have to feel these emotions and maybe there there's a lot going on there, but I don't know how to do that. Where do I start? How do I do it? Like my body isn't letting me feel, or how do I even uncover what it is that needs to be felt?
Yeah, those are some great questions. So, first thing is to reach out to someone. Like I said, instead of keeping it that silent, start reaching out, start asking questions. I
Mm,
know sometimes people are able to go see therapists. A lot of times they say, I don't have any resources. It can be something as simple as reaching out to friends, even
yeah,
strangers. I mean, there's so many groups, and as the awareness continues to spread and I think we're definitely doing a little bit of work with the stigma where more people are talking about it openly. So just
yeah,
by sharing and talking about it definitely helps. But one of the things is if a person is stuck and feeling these emotions and like they can't get out of it, is learning to become an observer of your emotions. I remember this was one of the earliest lessons that I learned. And I thought, I never knew how to observe my emotions. I thought when I feel it, it's like a coat, it's on me, it's heavy, there's nothing I can do. So as soon as I just did a one step removal of taking it off, so it's going to sound weird, but it's like I step out of my body and then I talk to myself. All right, Mark, what is it that you're feeling right now? Gosh, I'm feeling really anxious. I'm nervous. My stomach is kind of turning. Well, why do you think that is? I don't know. I know you don't. But if you had to guess, what was it? Just that one thing changed the way I looked at things. My go-to was I don't know. Had no idea it was rooted in my victim mindset. If I say I don't know, I can't be held responsible. And so it was this self-fulfilling prophecy, and that became my
mm,
go-to. Had another mentor that called me out, and I'll share it with you. It was another one of those life-changing moments. He said, I noticed you say I don't know a lot. And I said, yeah. He goes, why do you think that is? And I said, I don't know. And he started laughing. He goes, I knew you were going to say that. He said, let me help you out. He said, there's two types of people that get a pass when they say, I don't know. What do you think they are? And again, I said, I don't know. And he started laughing. He goes, look how deeply rooted this is. I said, well, are you willing to help me? He said, yeah. Yeah. He said, the first one is a kid. Kids don't have life experience, so it's okay for a kid to say, I don't know. And then that's part of the adults coming in, the tribe, the community, and we educate the kids by showing them, well, you don't know, that's okay. Here's what it means. He's like, but I don't think you're a child. And I'm kind of like, no, I'm not a child. Like wiping the tears away. He's like, I think you might be the second one. And I go, well, what's the second one? He goes, it's the victim. And for the first time, I felt anger and rage at this guy who was helping me change my life. Like, how dare you call me a victim? Again, fortunately, we had some very open dialogues. And so there's some rapport and trust.
yeah,
But he goes, it's okay for a victim to say, I don't know, because it can keep them in this place of false sense of security and safety. He said, I think you've unknowingly and unintentionally created this victim lifestyle. And so that's why it feels safe. Even among the chaos, you feel comfortable. And I'm like, oh, how does he know? And so that was one of my earlier lessons where I thought, okay, so what does it mean to no longer be a victim? And he goes, you take accountability for everything. But I didn't do it. He goes, doesn't matter. You take accountability for it. Like wherever you were, did you choose to be there? Oh, yeah. Like I remember I got rear ended. This was a long time ago. And he's like, yeah, take accountability. It's your fault. I'm like, no, I was stopped. The person hit me. He goes, did you choose to take that street? Did you choose to stop at the stop sign? And I wasn't able to hear it at first, but as it went deeper, I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, this is so freeing and liberating.
yeah,
I don't ever have to be a victim again. I can look and say, what is my part in this? Not from a guilt and shame place. That I learned that later. Not from like, oh, I'm so ashamed, it's my fault. But it's like, oh, it's my fault. So I drive different now. Every time I stop, especially at that intersection, because it's still down the street, when I stop, I know a lot of cars come in. I'll look in the rearview mirror. And if someone's coming too quick, I take accountability in case they might hit me and I inch forward. And I've probably avoided so many accidents because of that. So when we can learn of what's our part instead of saying, I have zero part, this is how we start to apply in all aspects of life. So same thing with depression. All right, what's my part in depression? Again, the little victim inside of me wants to say, nothing. But by using the tools we've talked about of observation, asking questions, I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't honor my commitment to myself yesterday. And so that's why I think I'm feeling a little bit of guilt and shame. And as I'm exploring this, that's where the depression's coming in. I ate this, I didn't do this. So instead of judging myself, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to do what I call a rational reset. I'm going to reset right now. I'm going to go ahead and recommit and take this action right now. And all of a sudden, the depression goes, thank you for listening. I needed that.
So many wonderful tools here. I want to kind of give a little recap and ask some follow-up questions. So one of them was with mentoring, and it's incredible how powerful mentoring can be, not just for our personal development, but also mental health and understanding our own patterns and actually healing some things in a different way than therapy, from a different kind of pathway and a different approach. And it's not as much known yet, it's not as mainstream to be coached or mentored for mental health as much as going to therapy. But it definitely, I mean, I hear it in your journey. I know I've experienced it in my journey. It's definitely an incredible opportunity that we have in this day and age. And the other thing that I want to circle back to was that tool that you mentioned when you said, I step out of my body and then I ask myself these questions. Like, that's an incredible process. How did you learn how to do that? Who is this I? And what does it mean to go through that? If you had to, for example, teach someone who has no idea that this is a tool that one could use, how would they go about it?
Well, I think I'm very fortunate because school was really tough for me. When I had to learn things that I didn't give a crap about, it sucked and it was tough. And I had to keep going to meet with teachers before class. I was in class, meet after class. I was the kid raising my hand. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, come on, because like I wanted to understand. So to answer your question, I started falling in love with learning things that were going to actually benefit my life. And so that's where mental health, just health and wellness, addiction, all these things I started looking at. And I thought, wow, this is so intriguing. Nobody taught me this. We don't teach this in schools. Let me start to learn for me. And so when you asked, how did you learn this? Just by Googling and then YouTube. So every single day I have something, and I said I wrote a book. It's called The Recovery Way. I go in depth here, but there's an actual habit and morning ritual that I do every single day. And what it does is it retrains and rewires the brain. And part of that is actually getting educated every single day in something that I love. And so for a long time, I was going down the rabbit holes of Carl Jung's work and shadow work and all these different things that we've had for a while, like Milton Erickson, just the Ericksonian approach. There's so many things. I'm going, how did people figure this out? And then I learned I don't have to find out how they figured it out. I can buy a book online for $10 and I can learn their entire life's work and go deep in these different areas. And so back to the laboratory living, I would read something, go, that makes a lot of sense. I would try it for 90 days. A lot of it, I go, that didn't work for me. So throw it out, go to the next one. And the cool thing is by living this way and trying different things, I found, gosh, this really worked well for me. And then I just started blending a lot of modalities together. And once it really started working well for me, I said, okay, I don't want to go down the scientific method, but let me see if this will work for other people. And so I have a few different men's groups I'm part of, and I would bring it into these different groups, and it would work really well for them. And I thought, I don't know if this would work for addiction and mental health. Let me try. And so I'd bring it in with a small group in our center, and we'd find they'd start thriving. And then I would bring it into the center, incorporate it into our program. And that's how we've grown over the multiple decades of what we do now is literally just trial and error. And I'm like, I'll be the guinea pig because if it works on me, I know it could probably work on anybody else. I usually learn a lot slower than other people. I have found ways to create frameworks that are very, very simple, taking something that I don't understand, belaboring it until I get it. And then for me, I learned at about a third grade level, fourth grade level. A lot of my friends laugh and say, that's so funny. I'm like, no, I'm being dead serious. When I break things down to a fourth grade level, I can ingrain them and memorize them and begin to live that way. And then when I show other people, like, that makes so much more sense than the psychiatrist said in here that was giving a lecture on this. I didn't understand that at all, but this I do. I'm like, yeah, give it a try. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, well, that's okay. We'll try something else.
That's awesome. For me, this idea of the I that is not the body makes me think a lot about spirituality and consciousness. And I know
Hmm.
that you mentioned earlier in your intro that you guys kind of blend Eastern philosophy elements in your approach. And I know I will testify for me that spirituality and particularly Eastern philosophies have had a huge positive impact on my mental health journey. I look into yoga. I've done meditation for a long time. I've gone to Buddhist centers, even just learning the theory from books that about the philosophies have been huge in helping me understand my bipolar symptoms and actually helping me. I wouldn't necessarily use the word heal, but at least integrate and file them away as healthy and packed memories and not, bad things that happen that kind of haunt me. So curious to know more about anything related to this Eastern philosophy, either from your perspective, your own personal journey, and or how you integrate them within the work that you guys do at the center.
Yeah, it's heavily incorporated. So one of the things we teach is called the five foundational freedoms. And one of the foundations we call faith, aka spirituality. And that is a huge part because what we found is when I'm consistently sedating and numbing out, I'm basically killing off my consciousness. And that's the part where we can call them divine downloads. We can get as woo as an individual wants to go. But
Mhm.
as we understand this, it's like when I actually spend time in silence and solitude and learn how to observe my thoughts and my feelings instead of saying my thoughts and my feelings are me. No, it's like a dashboard. It's like imagine driving and all of a sudden a little tire signal comes up and just says, oh, you got low air in your right tire. You don't go, this car's a piece of crap. This car's a failure. I'm getting rid of it. And you abandon it on the side of the road and then just keep walking. You just go, oh, all right. Thank you for the notification. This is great to know. I can still drive on it. And then when I take it in or when I go to a gas station, I'll fill it up with, I don't know, 3 to 5 PSI and we'll be good to go. Our emotions are very similar. It's like a dashboard. It's a signal board that we check in. And a lot of times it's just saying, hey, we're either out of alignment over here or we have a message for you. Are you willing to download it? And if I'm continually numbing and sedating, well, that message gets louder and louder and louder. And then when we're self-destructing, it's kind of like all hell breaks loose. So the reason why I like that analogy is part of we call it Five to Thrive. Its first fruits is every single morning of creating that space in solitude and silence and learning how to be okay with where I am. And if I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling great, experience the greatness. If I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling this sucks, experience the suck. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay because then
Yeah.
afterwards is where we actually start doing the work to recondition the brain through habits and consistent behaviors that kind of run this loop. And then it gets better and better and better over time. And then you just continually do the daily work. It's just like, oh, I'm hungry. Great. Did you eat today? No, I didn't eat, but dang, I don't want to be hungry. Well, why don't we get some food in you? I don't want to eat food. Well, then you're going to be hungry. Like you can't separate the two. So many people do the work to get the results. They love the results. They stop doing the work. They stop getting the results and they get pissed off going, this doesn't work. It does. You just got to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to know what are the other Fs? You mentioned five Fs, was that?
Yeah. So what happened was over time, because we've been doing this for so long, I started. So we do follow ups, and I would find we'd have some clients come through at the same time, have the same therapists, be in the same groups, the same case managers, leave around the same time. We do like a 2 or 3 year check in. One would be thriving, married, started a company, loving life, and the other was still struggling. And so I just started asking, I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I want to learn this and get better at this. And so as I started to ask questions, that's where I started seeing themes. And I started seeing daily actions that the people that were thriving were taking and that the people that were struggling were not taking. And so that was where there's five different areas in life. And I had to make them all F's because I couldn't remember them otherwise. It's in no order, but we look at fitness and health. Those that were thriving moved some way, somehow. And this is why I love frameworks. It wasn't like, okay, these are CrossFitters or these are yogis. It's whatever you want to do, but there's some form of movement where you're sweating every single day. The body was made to move, not sit behind a computer and do this all day. And I thought that's really interesting. And I've gone through seasons where I've tried all different types of movements. I had back surgery years ago, so I went through a season of just doing slow yoga type movements and then everything in between. And it's seasonal. That's why I love the framework. So first was fitness, and then the second part of fitness is what the supplementation is, the food. We found those that eat processed food have much bigger mood swings, inflammation, high sugar diets. Like forget about it. The brain chemistry is all over the place. When they eat actually non-processed food, little to no sugar, basically earth, meat, veggies, the stuff that we can find abundantly, they start feeling better. So that was the first part, which is fitness. Then faith, which is the second part. We started finding that people that were doing well were actually sitting in silence, daily gratitude, whatever it looks like. But the framework is checking in with myself, sitting. I call it divine downloads or creating with Christ or your creator, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually reading or writing scripture and then expanding that with the consciousness. And then the next was family and friends. We found those thriving, continued to invest every day in relationships, where those that weren't cut people off, were lying, manipulating. We thought, wow, this is amazing. So by cultivating relationships every single day, whether it's friends or family, really helped in this area. And then the next is finances. Those that were thriving continually were expanding their knowledge base. They were either taking courses, reading books, going on YouTube and taking self courses, where those that weren't. And what's amazing is we started seeing the divide. People were making great money, providing wonderful value to the world, where others were takers and saying, it's too hard out there. And so we saw those four for a while. I'm like, this is amazing. But I missed the fifth and final one. And these four sit on this fifth foundation. That's the foundation of feelings. Those that were really thriving were actually doing self-infliction work. They were colliding with their own thoughts, their stories, their narratives, and pulling out the war that was going on within, putting it on paper, and working through to ask themselves, like, is this true? Is this thought actually fiction, or is it just feedback? And through this process of checking in with feelings, we started noticing they would feel much better longer than those that felt like crap and wouldn't even address it. And so from there, that's where we came up with the first fruits in the morning. You pull out the five foundational freedoms, and then the five to thrive is the actions to take in each area, with the whole goal is to hit that perfect 10. If you can stack up 10 wins before most people even get out of bed, you're already in the winning process, and it makes life so much more fun. It gamifies it, and it just continually expands. And so that's actually one of the things, if it's okay with you, I created a Google document probably a couple of years ago, because people kept asking, like, I want to go in depth to find out what is the actual work to get these results. And so I'm on Instagram. It's probably the easiest way. You can go ahead, find me. It's at Pacific Shores Recovery. And anybody who follows me and just DMs me habits, I'll send you that Google document free, and it goes through trainings on each foundation, what it looks like, and those that are thriving, the actual examples of what they do, and then people can pick and choose with what they want to do, but it's the actual work that gets the results.
Incredible framework, this five F's. So just to recap, if I got them right, there was faith, there was fitness, which includes food, there was family and friends, there was finances, and there was feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And these five areas, one win in each of them, and you got yourself a framework to create a positively self-fulfilling cycle of just good neurochemistry, good feelings, starting the day like a winner, and improve mental health. Like no pills, no doctors, just the basics. And we've drifted so far from the basics, actually, with this society that we've created, with all the stress, the pollution, the toxins. I mean, this is a huge factor. Yeah. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing that framework. Uh,
absolutely.
I go to some music festivals, and I came across a different framework quite recently, Halto, Halto, And it's basically a checklist of, if you're not feeling good, check these 5 things. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Are you overwhelmed? Then go through that, solve each of those things, and then reevaluate your situation. And
Yeah.
probably 80 or 90% of the time, you will be taken care of. It's so much to do with the basics.
Yeah. Our body's always talking to us. It's wanting to keep connected.
Yeah, amazing. So, as we wind down towards the end of the podcast, I want to ask you, what are some things that you haven't yet mentioned that you'd just love to share with the audience?
I think you did a great job asking a lot of questions that led us down a lot of different holes. I think the biggest thing is, and we did hit on this, but is if you're listening to this and you're struggling or your life isn't where you thought it would be or want it to be, you're meant for more, is to start having these conversations and looking. So the only place that I have found where comparison is healthy is when you compare where you are now to where you were before. And if I'm
Mm,
not at a better place than I was before, then I want to start looking at what are my behaviors, what are my habits, what are my actions, because the past is what created this. And that means if I change this today, it means my future will start to change.
wow, that is such a beautiful perspective. Yeah, I came across the knowledge as well that the brain cannot think so far ahead as more than 1 year in the future. We evolved very seasonally, going, 3 months at a time, 6 months, maximum 1 year window. And the amount of change that we go through in a year, and compare that to 10 years, I mean, it's incredible. Uh, when we reflect back on who we were 10 years ago, there's most of the time it's going to show a positive trend. So even like with that framework of looking at your habits, looking at how you were doing a year ago, and course correcting based on that, and then just to amplify that motivation, look even further back and tell yourself how much far you've gone and what else is yet to come. Because
Mhm.
what can happen in 1 year and 10 years is totally unpredictable, you know?
Yeah, there's this beautiful duality of learning how to love who I am while continually becoming who I am to be.
Yeah, that's a mantra to have on a wall. Like the
Well, thank you
serenity
so
prayer.
much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this time and just getting to be with you and talk shop of how we can start to create a much better life than the one that we may be wanting to escape.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. If anybody would like to get in touch, what's the best way for that? Of course, we're going to include your bio and any links that you want to share in the show notes with this episode.
Yeah,
Anything you want
if
to say?
someone's looking, yeah, if someone's looking for treatment, our website is www.pacificshoresrecovery.com. So that's our actually in-house. We also have a virtual program. But if you're just wanting to chat or just wanting to see, you know, how can this life be different? Probably the easiest way is on Instagram at Pacific Shores Recovery, and just go ahead and follow and shoot me a DM, and we'll engage in a conversation. And then, if you do want the book to find out more about the 5 foundational freedoms, and there's a ton of exercises and work, you can find that on Amazon. It's just called The Recovery Way by Mark Manderson.
Wonderful. Amazing. Mark, thank you so much for your time and energy. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom, your inspiring story, and the amazing work that you are doing with the work in the world of mental health. Thank you for being on the podcast.
You got it. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate you.